In a relationship that felt too good to be true, I found myself swept off my feet by someone who seemed perfect.
He listened, he cared, he showered me with love and attention.
But soon, the charm started to wear off. What was once a dream relationship began to unravel with hurtful comments, flirtations with other women, and blatant dishonesty. He was always thoughtful, anticipating my needs, and surprising me with little gifts or gestures. We traveled by his small boat, and I could feel the wind in my hair, the sun on my face, as we headed toward the isolated spot. He was incredibly open about his past, and one evening he took me to his childhood home. I thought I had found someone who understood me, someone who truly cared. Little did I know, I was caught in the trap of love bombing, his way of drawing me in, making me dependent on his affection, and ensuring that I'd ignore any signs that something might be off. I was blinded by the fairy tale moments, and I didn't even see the red flags starting to appear in the distance. A casual comment here and there, maybe a passing flirtation, but soon it became clear he was flirting with other women in front of me. "You know you're the only one I care about," he'd say. But his words felt hollow, and each time I tried to voice my concerns, he would accuse me of being too sensitive or jealous. His excuses made me question myself. I started thinking maybe I was overreacting, that I was being too clingy, that I should just trust him. But the truth was, the more I tried to reassure myself, the more it started to wear on me. He'd make jokes with them, touch their arms, even exchange knowing glances. And what hurt the most was that he did it all while I was sitting right there, watching. At first, I tried to shrug it off, telling myself he didn't mean anything by it, that maybe I was just overreacting. But deep down, I felt the sharp sting of jealousy and insecurity creeping in. There, he showed me photos of his deceased parents, sharing stories of his fondest memories with them. It felt intimate and vulnerable, as if he was letting me into a deep part of his soul. And for a while, I believed him. He would become sweet again, showering me with affection, acting like the man I fell in love with. But this pattern of manipulation became a cycle of apologies followed by more hurtful actions, followed by more apologies. The affection I was getting felt like a reward for good behavior, and I was constantly having to prove my love and commitment just to earn it. Slowly, I was losing myself, clinging to the idea of the person I thought he was rather than facing the painful reality of who he had become. I was emotionally drained, always waiting for the next bombshell, never quite sure if the love I was receiving was real or just another manipulation. And as if to seal the moment, he gave me an old Toya keepsake from his childhood that he claimed was one of his most treasured memories. I felt honored, even a little overwhelmed by the level of trust he was placing in me. Once there, he had everything prepared: blankets on the sand, homemade food, and chilled limoncello waiting for us. It felt like a scene out of a romantic movie. But over time, I began to notice cracks in the perfect image he had painted. The sweet, loving gestures that had once made me feel like the most important person in the world were slowly replaced with coldness and criticism. The compliments, once so abundant, became fewer and fewer. And when they did come, they were often laced with backhanded remarks. We even went diving afterward, and he found a giant seashell, which he handed to me with a smile, telling me it was a token of his love. He would make a snide comment about my appearance, or criticize something I said in a conversation. It wasn't direct or overtly cruel, but just enough to leave me feeling unsure of myself. One day, after I'd dressed up for a special date night, he looked at me and said, "You look okay, I guess. But you could have done your hair better." I tried to laugh it off, but the sting of his words lingered. Then it escalated. He started making remarks about my interests, belittling things I was passionate about. He'd say things like, "You really enjoy that? I don't get it. Or why do you spend so much time on that?" Each comment, no matter how small, chipped away at my confidence. The gesture was so sweet, so thoughtful, I couldn't help but feel that this was it, that he was the one. It was like every moment with him was a dream I didn't want to wake up from. He'd send me sweet texts at random times, reminding me how much he appreciated me. Even the small things were magnified. His compliments felt sincere. His affection was overwhelming. It was everything I had ever hoped for in a relationship, and I believed every word he said. It was a devastating realization that I wasn't the one who mattered. So I decided to take control. What followed was the ultimate revenge, a web of fake dates that would send my cheating boyfriend on a wild chase he'd never forget. In the beginning, everything was picture perfect. It felt like a dream come true, one of those fairy tales where everything falls into place effortlessly. From the start, he had a way of making me feel seen in a way no one ever had before. Our conversations flowed effortlessly, and it felt like we'd known each other for years. We had so much in common, and he was genuinely interested in everything I said. He'd listen to me as if I were the only person in the world. There was something almost magical about the way he made me feel special, cherished, and loved. Our connection deepened quickly, and it was hard not to get swept up in the intensity of it all. One of the most memorable moments was when he took me to an uninhabited island for a picnic. But it didn't stop there. At that time, I was so enraptured by his attentiveness and the depth of his affection that I never once questioned the sincerity behind his actions. At first, the changes were subtle, almost imperceptible. It started with small moments that I brushed off as nothing more than stress or misunderstandings. At first, it was little things. But the most painful shift came in his behavior toward other women. At first, it wasn't obvious. Whenever I confronted him about it, he'd brush it off. "It's just a joke, babe." The emotional toll it took on me was exhausting. Each time I cried, each time I expressed my hurt, he would apologize profusely and promise to do better. It was an ordinary day, or at least it started that way. I had just gotten out of the shower and was in the middle of getting ready for the evening when I noticed something strange. From the corner of my eye, I saw his phone sitting on the kitchen counter, glowing. My first thought was that maybe I was mistaken, that it was just some random app or that he was just browsing for a laugh. But something inside me told me this wasn't casual. A while back, he'd asked me for help setting up an online account for a chess game. The whole process had been a bit tricky, and he had given me his username and password to guide him through it. I didn't think much of it at the time, but as the memory resurfaced, I felt the cold rush of clarity. Some of the conversations were downright graphic, recounting intimate details of encounters I had never known about. The truth hit me like a ton of bricks. Everything I thought was real, everything I thought we shared, had been a lie. My mind was racing, and it felt like the world had tilted on its axis. I had been living in a dream, and now I was awake, and it was time to face the truth, no matter how painful it was. My heart hurt in a way I didn't know was possible. Now, I wasn't going to beg for anything. I wasn't going to cry anymore. I wasn't going to be a victim. Instead, I decided to fight back strategically. No more emotional outbursts. No more futile arguments. This time, I was going to show him the consequences of his actions, and I was going to do it on my terms. The man I had loved, trusted, and opened myself up to was a complete stranger, and the life I thought we were building together had been nothing more than a lie. At first, I felt a little guilty for deceiving him, but then I reminded myself that he had deceived me first. A woman walked through the door who looked just like my profile picture. It was a perfect coincidence, or maybe fate, whatever you want to call it. He saw her, and without missing a beat, he immediately approached her. Later that afternoon, I messaged him through the dating site, identifying myself as the woman he had tried to meet. I told him that I had seen him waiting there and that I found him physically unattractive. I explained that I had recognized him but pretended not to know who he was because I didn't have the courage to confront him publicly. I apologized for not telling him straight up, but I wanted him to know that I wasn't interested. He said something to her, but she dismissed him with a wave of her hand. Still, he didn't give up. But I knew better. He was lying. He was rattled, and I had hit a nerve. He was a man who prided himself on his charm, his ability to manipulate, and his control over others. To have someone, especially a woman, he thought he could have turned him down so flatly, to humiliate him in the same way he had done to me, well, that was something he wouldn't forget. He tried to talk to her again, but she was clearly annoyed and told him to leave her alone. I could barely contain my satisfaction as I watched him squirm. It was almost like watching the man who had humiliated me fall into the exact same trap I had once been in. It was time to turn the tables. I began chatting with him under the guise of a woman who had just so happened to be on the same dating site. I played it cool, engaging in casual conversation and slowly building a rapport. It wasn't long before he bit hook, line, and sinker. But as I sat there, surrounded by the remnants of my shattered trust, something shifted inside me. I feigned hesitation, acting like I was unsure whether or not I wanted to take it to the next level. I was far from done. The suspense was enough to drive him crazy. He didn't see me at first, and I let him stand there for a few moments, just long enough for him to start wondering if he had been stood up. The longer he waited, the more palpable his discomfort became. He started shifting in his seat, looking at every woman who walked in, trying to see if any of them matched the profile of the woman he thought he was supposed to meet. But none of them did. The truth was, I wanted him to feel the anticipation, the nervous excitement of meeting someone new, just like I had when we first met. He pressed me, and eventually I agreed to meet him at a popular coffee shop in town. I realized that while he had taken so much from me, there was one thing he couldn't steal: my power. I took a seat at a table in the corner, half disguised with a hat and sunglasses, ensuring I wouldn't be recognized. I watched the door with a quiet sense of satisfaction as I waited for him to arrive. I knew this would be the moment that set everything into motion, and I wasn't going to let him get away with it. I had given him everything, opened up to him in ways I had never done with anyone before. And now I was faced with the cold, brutal reality that he had never cared at all. It wasn't love. It wasn't even respect. He had been playing me, pretending to care while simultaneously searching for someone else, someone better. Someone who fit the image of the perfect woman he had painted in his head. And I was left in the wreckage, unable to understand how I had let myself get so caught up in his web of manipulation. The worst part, he had even mentioned me in these chats, but not in a way that made me feel special. He criticized me, talking about how I wasn't good enough in certain areas. He complained about me, about how I wasn't what he was looking for, even though I had poured my heart into our relationship. It wasn't just a chess game, it was a password. A password that could open the door to answers I'd been avoiding. He had mentioned before that he was just testing me, seeing if I'd get jealous or if I'd act too controlling again. There was the profile that I never thought I'd find. The profile that shattered everything I thought I knew. But what hurt more than the fact that he had a profile was what I found inside it. He'd said it so casually, like it was nothing. But standing there, phone in hand, I realized that this didn't feel like a test. It felt like something far worse. Curiosity got the better of me, and I wandered over to it, thinking maybe there was something important he wanted to show me. Something deep in my gut told me that this wasn't a simple misunderstanding, and I wasn't going to let it slide. I had to know the truth. I had no intention of snooping, at least not consciously. But as I picked it up, my stomach twisted with a feeling I couldn't shake. He was on an online dating site. I froze, my heart racing. I knew I couldn't just let it go. I remember him mentioning once that he wasn't good with technology. With trembling fingers, I typed the details into the dating site's login page. My heart was pounding as I hit enter. It was him, his face, his name, everything. The messages. Hundreds of them. He had been chatting with other women, flirting, making plans to meet them, even talking about how they had hooked up. I could hardly breathe. I felt like I was suffocating under the weight of betrayal. I sank to the floor, the phone slipping from my hands as I felt the tears fall freely. I wasn't angry yet. I was just down. All I could think was that this was my wake-up call. The initial shock of my discovery left me paralyzed. I cried for hours, my body shaking with the weight of the betrayal. I had spent so long begging for his affection, apologizing for things that weren't my fault, and trying to fix something that was beyond repair. I created a fake dating profile, one that mirrored my own appearance and personality. Within days, he suggested we meet. I could practically hear the eagerness in his messages, the excitement that someone else was showing interest in him. The day of our meeting, I arrived early, my heart pounding with a mix of nerves and excitement. Sure enough, he walked in, glancing around with that familiar look of hopeful desperation. Then, just when I thought he might lose hope and leave, something amazing happened. He waited for another half hour, growing more frustrated by the minute, and eventually he left defeated, embarrassed, and confused. I didn't just sit back and watch this unfold in silence. His response was typical. He played it off as if he wasn't hurt, saying, "It's okay, no hard feelings." That was just the beginning. Once I had tasted the sweet satisfaction of the first successful test, my resolve strengthened. I knew I wasn't going to let him off easy. This wouldn't be a one-time stunt. It would be a series of deliberate, calculated moves designed to hit him where it hurt most. I would arrange a meeting, give him a time and place, and then disappear. He would show up just like I knew he would. I made sure to choose locations where I knew I could blend in, places he would never expect me to be watching. He waited for nearly an hour before trying to approach another woman who had entered. I started canceling last minute, offering flimsy excuses about needing to reschedule. He tried reaching out to me directly, sending messages through the dating site with increasing urgency. It was a mix of cold indifference and subtle cruelty, but I made sure to leave him guessing. "I'm not interested," I said. I wasn't just getting revenge for the hurt he had caused me. I was taking control of my own narrative. I wasn't the one being left in the dark anymore. I wasn't the one wondering what he was up to. He was the one in the hot seat now, and I was the one pulling the strings. And frankly, I'm getting tired of your games. His response was immediate, pleading, apologetic, but also defensive. He wanted to know what he had done wrong, and he was quick to accuse me of being overly sensitive or not understanding his need for excitement. It was exactly what I expected, and I couldn't help but smirk at how predictable he was. He was the same man who had played with my heart, blaming me for everything when it was clear that the problem was him all along. He told me he was having bad luck, and couldn't he understand why none of the women he met seemed to stick around? I didn't respond at first, letting him stew in his own thoughts. But as time passed, I decided to push a little further. I wanted him to truly feel the weight of what he had done. I wanted to make sure he really understood what it felt like to be strung along, to experience the exact hurt and humiliation I had endured. Each time, I could feel his pride take a hit, his ego bruised just a little more. His actions were catching up with him and he didn't even realize it. This time, she seemed more aware of what he was doing, and when he spoke to her, she quickly dismissed him, saying she wasn't interested.
He hesitated, almost like he was going to argue, but she walked away without a second glance.
His cheeks flushed red, and he retreated to his seat, visibly embarrassed. Watching him like that was bittersweet. I could feel the satisfaction building up inside me, but at the same time, there was a part of me that couldn't help but feel bad for him. Not that I was ready to forgive him, but I could see the human side of his vulnerability. My heart would race each time, not from anxiety, but from the thrill of knowing that I was finally turning the tables. Each fake date would be a reminder of the humiliation and pain he had caused me. But it wasn't just about hurting him. It was about showing him the consequences of his actions, about making him realize that he could no longer manipulate or control me. I began to set the stage. Each time, I used the same fake profile I had created, carefully crafting our interactions to mimic the innocent, flirtatious vibe I had once had with him. I kept the chats light and playful, just enough to bait him in without making it obvious. And sure enough, he bit every time. The messages started to get more frequent, his eagerness more apparent. This time, I wasn't the one waiting for him to show up. I was the one watching him squirm. The first time he tried asking a woman who walked in for a chance, I could barely suppress a smile. She was polite, but it was clear she wasn't interested. She shrugged him off and he looked around again, probably hoping that some other woman would walk through the door. But no one did. He sat, staring at the door, as if willing it to open and bring someone else his way. He was desperate, but he didn't know who he was really talking to. The first few dates were simple. At first, I just watched him wait. I could see the uncertainty in his eyes as he scanned the room, checking his phone every few minutes, wondering if he had been stood up. Each time, I watched him sink further into his frustration. At first, he would sit there patiently, tapping his foot or scanning the cafe as if to see if he had missed her. But as time ticked on, his patience started to wane, and his desperation grew. It was the kind of desperate energy that had once drawn me to him in the beginning, the feeling that he needed me, that I was the one he had been waiting for. But now it felt different. The second time, I could see him growing more frustrated. As the dates piled up, I began to get even more creative. Eventually, his frustration reached a tipping point. I crafted a message that I knew would make him squirm. Through all of this, I felt a strange sense of empowerment. Each failed date, each moment of discomfort he felt, was a small victory in my journey toward reclaiming my dignity. And it was just the beginning. After weeks of orchestrating fake dates and watching him suffer in the same way he had made me feel, I knew it was time to bring this to a close. My heart was no longer invested in the relationship. I had long since detached emotionally, watching from the outside as he stumbled through my elaborate trap. What had started as a way to get back at him had evolved into something much more significant, reclaiming my power, my sense of self-worth, but now I was ready for the final act. It wasn't enough to just humiliate him behind the scenes. It was time to confront him face to face, to give him the truth, and let him know exactly what I had been doing all along. I was ready. I had prepared for this moment, and I wasn't going to let him talk his way out of it. I chose a public place for the breakup, a busy cafe where I knew we wouldn't be interrupted. It felt fitting. There, in front of strangers, I would expose him for who he really was. His mouth opened as if he was about to speak, but nothing came out. The dates, the messages, everything. I set you up. You've been played, just like you played me. You've been waiting for women who don't exist, trying to meet with a woman who never even wanted to show up. I wanted you to feel exactly what you put me through, to understand what it's like to be strung along, humiliated, and disrespected. He had been caught, exposed in front of me, and now, for the first time, I saw a glimpse of the man behind the mask. His bravado had crumbled, and in its place was the uncomfortable reality of someone who had just been shown the consequences of his own actions. You've been made the fool, not me. No more games, no more second chances. I walked away, knowing that I had finally taken back my power, and that he would never be able to play me again. For so long, I had been the one left in the dark, the one constantly questioning my worth. And I was finally starting to feel like myself again. After everything he had put me through, the lies, the manipulation, the betrayal, his words were just that, words. For a brief moment, I felt a strange sense of triumph. He had reached out, tried to reel me back in, but I was no longer the person I had been when I was with him. I wasn't the woman who had begged for his attention, the woman who had cried for his affection. I had found my strength again, and I wasn't going to let him undermine it. Empty, hollow words that couldn't erase the damage he had done. But each time I ignored him. I didn't want to revisit that chapter of my life. I didn't want to indulge his need for validation or rekindle any of the emotions that had once consumed me. The truth was, I had moved on completely and utterly. He had taken everything from me, and no apology, no matter how well worded, would ever change the fact that he had hurt me in ways I couldn't even begin to explain. One morning, I received an unexpected email. He claimed that it proved I was the love of his life. He said that what I did showed how deeply I cared for him. His attempts to win me back were nothing more than a reminder of how much I had grown, how far I had come. The woman who had once been manipulated was gone. In her place stood someone stronger, someone who had learned from the past and refused to let it define her. That it meant I still had feelings for him, and that no one had ever gone to such lengths for him before. He even wrote that he couldn't stop thinking about me, that every woman he met after me reminded him of me, and that he had stopped using online dating entirely because he was too afraid of meeting someone who might be just like me. At first, I didn't recognize the name, but when I opened it, I saw his familiar words staring back at me. His name, his tone, everything about it hit me with a wave of disbelief. The weight of the betrayal had lessened, though not the kind I would have ever expected. It was a confession of sorts. There it was again, his manipulative, narcissistic mindset. He was trying to turn the situation around, to make me feel as if my revenge, my need for closure, was somehow proof that I hadn't really moved on. He wanted me to believe that his feelings were hurt, that I was somehow still important to him, and that this was all some grand love story in disguise. A message that was part regret, part praise, and completely centered on himself. He wrote that what I had done to him, setting him up, orchestrating the fake dates, was ingenious, as he put it. It was a strange compliment, but the more I read, the clearer it became that this wasn't just an apology. It was a twisted form of admiration, as though he saw my Revenge is some kind of clever game rather than the act of reclaiming my dignity. The sting of his manipulations had begun to fade, and I was reclaiming my life free from the toxic grip he had once had on me. I was moving forward, healing and finding peace in the quiet moments. But now the tables had turned. I had taken control of the narrative, and he could no longer twist the story in his favor. I could see the confusion and panic setting in. He was trying to process what I had just said, struggling to comprehend the reality of the situation. He was speechless. The man who always had a response, always had an excuse, was finally rendered silent. "You're the one who's messed up. You've been paranoid this whole time, making up these lies. None of this is real." For a moment, I thought he might actually break down. But instead, he straightened up, trying to regain some semblance of control over the situation. His eyes narrowed, but he stayed silent, probably trying to gauge what was coming next. I needed him to hear the truth loud and clear. No excuses, no more manipulation. He tried to spin the story, make it sound like I was imagining things, like I was overreacting or being paranoid. He gaslighted me, told me that I had misunderstood, and that I was just jealous. But as I stood up to leave, I saw it in his eyes. He wasn't ready to let go. Even though he had been exposed, even though I had ripped away the veil of his lies, he wasn't ready to accept that it was over. He still tried to reach out to me, sending messages and emails in the weeks that followed, desperate to regain my affection. He even accused me of trying to sabotage our relationship for no reason, as if all his actions were my fault. When we met, he seemed unusually calm, maybe because he had no idea what was coming. I didn't waste any time. I looked him in the eye and told him that it was over. "You're a cheater. And I can't be with someone who has so little regard for me," I said, my voice steady. At first, he denied everything, like I knew he would. I had heard all of this before, but it didn't affect me anymore. I took a deep breath and then dropped the bombshell. "All those failed dates?" I said, watching his face closely. "All me." For a moment, he just blinked, his expression unreadable. But then the color drained from his face as the words sank in. I didn't let him off the hook. I continued, "I used your dating profile, all of it." His face twisted with disbelief. I could see the frustration building in his eyes as he processed my words, but there was also a flicker of shame. "You're crazy," he spat, his voice laced with venom. But it was real. The look on his face, the way he tried to deny it, only confirmed how deeply the truth had struck him. Despite his deflection, I felt a sense of closure wash over me. The finality of the breakup felt liberating. It wasn't just the end of a relationship, it was the end of his ability to manipulate me. But I was done. A few months passed after the breakup, but then the email was an apology. In his message, my stomach twisted as I read his words. But none of it moved me. What he didn't understand, what he failed to grasp, was that his apology, his confession meant absolutely nothing to me. I closed the email without a second thought and deleted it immediately. He tried a few more times after that, sending texts and emails hoping I'd respond, and I didn't look back. The closure I had been seeking, the peace I had needed to reclaim my life, was finally mine. I realized then that the most powerful thing I could do was walk away and never look back. Looking back, I can't say I regret what I did. I never sought revenge out of malice, but out of the need to regain my dignity and sense of self-worth. He had taken so much from me, but in the end, I was the one who came out on top. I learned the hard way that no one should ever be made to feel small in a relationship, and no one should ever be used. My journey wasn't just about revenge, it was about reclaiming my power. And now I'm stronger and more confident than ever. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Have you ever had a situation where you had to take matters into your own hands? Let me know in the comments below. And remember, you're always worth more than the games others play.